I want to talk about drawing from a mannequin as reference or some sort of figure. And this could be an actual real life figure or even a 3D model. Having a good model will allow you to speed up your workflow. There are instances where you could actually do tracings from your model to really speed things up rather than having to figure out where all the limbs are located and what angles and all that. You can simply use your photo reference and trace over it and basically skip that entire step. It's a huge way to save time. So I want to talk about that for a second because sometimes it's useful and sometimes it actually isn't. So here I'm using my model as a guide, and I've used it to skip quite a few steps and get right into my drawing process and my contour lines really quickly. One benefit is that my proportions are going to be pretty right on because I have an anatomically correct model. However, another thing that can be taken into account is how the photograph was taken. So I just used a phone to take a picture of the model. So as you can see, the focal length is greatly exaggerated. This really gives a wide angle type look because the camera is close to the figure. The perspective is quite exaggerated. So if this is the effect that I'm going for, there's nothing wrong with that. However, one way to remedy this is to use a much longer focal length or get much further away from the figure so that the perspective is not forced so much. Now, your figure may be smaller in your photograph. It will have a lot less of that forced perspective going on and won't look as exaggerated. So here you can see I've created my contour outline and I've used that to start putting in my colors. I've put in my flats. Basically what I've done is just taken one color for each element and put that color in and use that as a foundation. I've plotted in a shadow scheme using just a darker purple color. And then once I have that in place and I'm happy with it, I change the blend mode to multiply and knock the opacity down until I feel it fits really well with my character. And here you can see I've been experimenting with some highlights, putting some highlights in, putting a little bit of red around certain regions like the knees and the cheeks and the nose. One little trick is I duplicated my folder that had the character in it and then I flattened it and then I knocked the brightness all the way down so it was a black silhouette. And then I was able to use a transform and just distort it, and that's how I was able to make the shadow. And here I've just put in a background. Notice I've matched the perspective to the figure. A real key element here are her feet. The feet really show what direction the perspective lines are going. So I used that to help me put in a background just using some grid vanishing point lines. And now once that's all set, I put a few finishing touches on it, tweak a few things. I had the arm pulled way too far forward, which is another problem with using the mannequin. So I actually had to push that back because it just didn't look right. So now I'm going to show you the same method, but this time instead of doing a tracing, I'm simply looking at the pose and I'm using that to create my figure. And what you'll see is that this figure has a little bit more personality to it. I feel like I have a little bit more control of things, so I could tilt the hips a little bit more. I can tilt the head a little bit. I can, adjust things a little bit differently as opposed to just being stuck with my reference and making it have to look just like my reference, which is what happens when you trace it. So then I create my contour, I do my flats, and then I create my shadow scheme, again using that purple color, putting it over the top and knocking the opacity down and changing the blend mode. And now we can see the comparison between doing a tracing of a mannequin and then just using the mannequin as reference. I really feel like the tracing is very stiff. It doesn't have as much life to it. So keep that in mind when you're working from reference material.